firstborn. In that room, right there, in the world that you're born into, they give you a coat with lead in it. Right there on the spot. Now you can't see it, it's invisible. But it's made up of the constituent elements of the essence of the parents and the doctors and everything going on around you. You're bathed in a certain kind of energy when you come into this world. And that energy cannot be separated from all of the moving parts that you are thrown into, and that you are constantly trying to figure out what's my part in amongst all of these moving parts. Starts very young. We're all good to go? Maybe I should just go on with this talk. I'm going to finish it up. And I tell you that awakening is like finding one of those lead bars sewn into the hem of your coat and you're stuffed in your pocket. And every time you wake up a little bit, one of those lead weights falls away that you didn't even know was there. And then there are some much bigger moments than that. But if you get to the point where you have some of these bigger moments, even as the weight is being revealed to you as having always been there without any of your awareness of it, even as you're made aware of it, it falls away. And you understand exactly why you have been and done and said all the things that you've been, said, and done throughout this life. You actually understand the unseen basis of the consciousness that is interfaced between you and this world. And in that grace, you grow faith in the operation of the light that reveals these things to you. So you're no longer a captive of your own concerns, your own fears. Okay? Where am I? I have to read the key. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, let people know on YouTube and Facebook that we had trouble with your stuff.
Oh, okay. Kate says to let you know. She secretly runs the foundation, along with Chris in the back. People joining us on other streaming sites besides Webinar. We had a technical issue. And so I was just talking to some of the students here about something that a couple of them spoke to when they were up in front of the mic, and which we often do. It's one of the reasons it's nice to be here, because you get a little more direct nourishment. But now it's time to actually have the talk. So let's get started. Nice deep breath. Welcome everyone, wherever you are, whatever day in the time it is. I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad that we have not just a way to share the ideas that we do that are liberating once realized, but that there's actually a kind of exchange that can take place between myself and the people in the room and everyone who's watching. You're in the right place. So here's the topic for tonight's talk. It's walk away from anxious thoughts and feelings before they work you over. So let's get right into the talk. How many of you are often worked over by anxious thoughts and feelings? Hands, please. You two out there in web, Facebook, YouTube land. What if you could walk away from an anxious thought or a fearful feeling before it sinks its thoughts and its fears into you, and you would know for a fact that and this is quite literally, you would know for a fact that something just saved you from something that you've gone through 1,000 times, and that you don't have to go through it anymore. What would you give to be able to give up, not go through this daily visitation by anxious thoughts and feelings that work you over? And by work you over, you know exactly what that means, right? So now that I have the right group of people, here's the key lesson. There can be no fearful thought of any time to come, let alone the anxious struggle to control or otherwise avoid it, without resisting a moment that has no existence outside of how we've unconsciously imagined it. Please let it sink in. There can be no fearful thought of any time to come, let alone anxious struggle to control or otherwise avoid it, without resisting a moment that has no existence outside of how we have unconsciously imagined it in that moment. It seems so simple, almost too good to be true, to hear the idea, anyway, that the only real problem that any of us have at any point in our life is that we're sleeping, that we're in a dream. We don't know we're sleeping when we're protecting ourselves, defending ourselves, thinking about our life, what's going to happen. We don't know we're in a dream. We're doing that because part of the dream carries with it all of this immense sensation, the experience that validates the dream. So the body literally works as a kind of a validating instrument for the thoughts and feelings that are victimizing it and you and I while it's going on. You see it? So you have to ask yourself, how's that possible? And I spoke briefly about this. I hope you were able to catch the informal material I gave. We're taught by example, literally from birth. We're infected with a certain love of anticipation, a love of the sensation of what might happen. What does this mean? Where am I going? What's going to go down if this? There is a constant titillation of this nature of ours that we don't know is constantly being titillated. So that we live, to make it clear, in a sea of sensations that, as we are identified with it, makes our life and us feel like we're very real. Do you understand that? And it's so incessant that to anticipate some unwanted moment the way we do, would you not agree that you're always anticipating the meaning of an unwanted moment? To anticipate an unwanted moment is somehow conducive to the contentment that follows sorting all of that out. So that I think to myself, when I'm sorting out something that I'm afraid of or anxious about, that I've actually accomplished something, because that's all I do all day long is try to sort through some form of suffering telling me something's happening and you don't know what it is, but you will just sort it out. Yay or nay? So in essence, what's happened is that we're wrapped up in a kind of a web of thoughts and feelings that are worried and nervous and anxious, and that all of these thoughts that we're wrapped up in, none of them appear by themselves. Each worried thought and feeling appears with something that it says it needs to console it given the circumstances that it's in. So we can't separate the fact of our identification with these anxious thoughts and feelings from the fact that the very appearance of them in us is bringing us to a place where those thoughts and feelings are telling us, just analyze this, just work your way through this particular time, you get through this moment, and everything will be great. You just need to worry a lot about what it is that you're facing, and guaranteed if you worried enough, you will be released from your worry at some point in time. And as I love to say, how's that going for you? It's like a joke, except you don't know that you're in it, that it's all over you, and that you don't know that something's happening to you all the time. I honestly, before I go further, if I could impart to you a way for you to feel the incessant tension that you're in, if you could glimpse it, and glimpse it without allowing that tension tell you what to do to relieve yourself from it, you'd start to understand why so many of the things that you do that you're caught up in, that you're always working to resolve, you'd understand why it's never been resolved. Because the condition is not the source of the anxiety or the fear, ever. But we have almost no awareness of this constant state of what we can call high anxiety, a constant search for a way to resolve a sensation, a tension in the body that one just doesn't know what to do with, because the mind always sees the source of the problem and the pain outside of the condition the body's experiencing. This is classic division, being classically divided. Everybody following me so far? So all forms of this, what we call anticipation, no anticipation can appear in this consciousness without some form of fear attending it. What is my anticipation of any given moment? How many of you know that you are constantly anticipating certain things to happen? And what's the motive for the anticipation? Seemingly to get through the moment. Preparation. Preparation for what? Preparation for what? Well, I didn't prepare so well last time, or I wouldn't have to prepare this time. But I believe that I need to be prepared for the moment that's coming. And what we're going to discover here tonight is that no moment as imagined is coming. Not one. It never has and it never will. And you'll see it by the time we're done with this. What you are preparing is you are being parboiled by a certain state of consciousness that ensures that it keeps you busy handling what it needs to continue itself by endlessly imagining a time to come where if you don't prepare, you stand to lose something bad will happen to you, so you got to get prepared. Yes or no? So let's bring you into this. I want to start early. If you're joining me for the first time on some other network, streaming, whatever it is, on Wednesday nights we always do some group work together. And we do the group work so that everyone here and joining me, you can write in the box, we all address and give answers to a question that when we're done looking at all of this, invariably we make a very invaluable discovery about how our consciousness is no different than anyone else's. So here is the name of the list that we're going to work on. I trust that you will be active and present and volunteer your insights. Here it is. Name some past, present, or future circumstance in your life that each time you hear it, knock, knock, knocking at your door, always brings with it some form of anxiety, worry, fear, or doubt that then you feel compelled to deal with. Name some past, present, or future circumstance in your life that each time you hear it, knock, knock, knocking at your door, always brings with it some form of fear, anxiety, worry, or doubt that you then feel compelled to deal with. Is that question clear enough? So what are some of these what are some of these things that knock on your door? We'll start in the room and then I'm going to ask you to join us. Terry.
When I'm accused of something.
Anytime I am accused of something, something is knocking at the door. Now, if I'm accused, what has that got to do with my anxiety, fear, or worry? This is what we want to look at, right? We're saying, what is it that brings up this anxiety, fear, or worry? Barbara.
Aging.
What?
Aging.
Barbara said, when I look in the mirror, I feel anxious or afraid. I worry. All three at once. Chris.
When I have to have a difficult conversation with somebody.
I feel anxious, afraid, or worried anytime I know I have to sit down with somebody and have a conversation that I would rather eat cilantro from the ground than deal with. I always speak personally here. Over on the board, Isabella, paying bills and taxes every month. Rebecca says, retirement, preparing for retirement. I don't know if you've noticed this yet. Everybody you talk to says, I can't wait till I retire. And then they actually get to the time when they're retired, and then they're terrified of retiring. What am I going to do with my time? Am I going to have enough money? What's going to take place if this doesn't go the way I want to? Judith says, anytime my ability is questioned, in the room, please. Debbie.
How can people treat me like that?
How can people be so thoughtless? How can people be so cruel? Easy. Anytime people are cruel to me, what happens? It brings up fear, anxiety, worry, doubt in me. Anybody else in the room here? Ellen.
Having to do something that I don't feel adequate to do.
Anytime something, life comes along, and it's always in an inopportune time, and it says, get this done. And I don't think I can get it done in the time allotted. I don't think I can get it done given what I have to do it with. You fill in the blank. You all understand that. Over on the board, Randall, what if I can't handle a future situation? Laura, anytime I'm misunderstood. Namita, miss out on future spiritual possibilities. You know what's really good about a work group, and some of you have been with us long enough that we're getting to know you, is that when you see certain people, you actually know what it is that they are dealing with that they can't see they're dealing with. When you're long enough with a group of people who are willing to be honest about themselves, through their honesty, you discover things about yourself that, though may not be true for you in that particular case, is in fact true for everyone in some way or another. In the room, Roger.
How am I going to pull that off?
Well, you haven't so far. What he said was, basically, I've developed quite the polished appearance, but underneath it, I'm a quaking mess of old oats. I'm a mess. How am I going to pull it off? He said. Anytime you're trying to get through something, much like what Ellen was saying, how am I going to get through this? How am I going to pull it off and come out smelling like a rose? Right? Who else in the room? John.
Kind of related to Roger, when I have to ask somebody for help or to ask somebody to do something.
Boy, that's a big one that most people never even think about. I'm going to give a whole talk on that. What in the name of God has happened to human beings that they're afraid to need someone else? Not depend on someone else. That's been cultivated into an infection that may be beyond healing. But the idea that I can't let on that I am not what I appear to be, and now, in spite of all this polished, I'm in pain and I need help. It's a big one. Anybody else in the room? Patricia.
Trying to figure out why someone did what they did.
I get anxious, angry, afraid, blah, blah, blah. Anytime my mind starts drilling down on why is someone that way. How about when you turn on the news? I'm surprised I haven't heard that. You watch the news so that, whether you know it or not, you watch the news so you can get upset. You actually don't know that. If you did, if you actually knew that, you wouldn't watch the news. Or if you did, you would watch it consciously instead of being captured by it. Over on the board, Deborah M. When I hear music from a certain era, it brings sad memories. That's interesting. So certain things trigger old emotions, and when they trigger the old emotions, I'm filled with anxiety. We've only just begun. I never got started. Who else? Dana.
When someone gets upset with me.
If someone doesn't like me for the moment, I get very nervous. And by the way, why? Because who am I without you seeing me the way I believe you should look at me? Feeling inadequate. Yes, Deborah. Okay. Travis, compelled, to prove myself worthwhile. Yes, Leah.
Making a mistake.
If I make a mistake, as long as nobody sees it, I'm fine. Even then, I condemn myself. But God forbid that somebody should see me, my face get contorted with anger, or see me bawling in the airport and in Sacramento. All right. Anybody else? Last one? Anybody? Okay, yes, John.
Worrying about my health.
I get anxious every morning when I sit up on the edge of my bed. I go, please, knees, be under me when I stand up. Okay. So that's a pretty good list, wouldn't you say, everybody? Now, let's make a transition. Apart from practical reasons, which there are sometimes, apart from practical reasons, the only reason that any of us ever feel the need to do what? To try and look beyond the present moment. Isn't that what we're talking about? Only reason we feel the need to try and look beyond the present moment, which is what all the analysis is about what happened. And by the way, the only way you can look beyond the present moment is to look into imagination. This is critical for you to understand. You are not looking into the future, people. You are looking into the only future that your imagination allows you based on your conditioning and past experiences. So you think you're looking out at something that's going to happen? You are not looking out into the future. You are looking into a picture that your own mind produces in that moment, so that in you seeing the picture it has put there, you can then go, oh my God, what am I going to do about that? Do you see that? But when you're looking at, you're not thinking to yourself, you're looking at your own negative imagination. You think you're looking at reality itself, and the more you see how hard or harsh or alone or fearful or empty it may be, the more fear you feel. Because then you start to resist the appearance of an image your own mind has made that you don't know your mind made, because you believe you're looking into the time to come. Yes or no, please? Do you see it? So now I have to try to figure out, which is why we try to look beyond the present moment. What do I do when I look beyond the present moment? What am I doing? I'm trying to figure out how I can deal with it. Yes or no? I mean, why else outside of, I've got a job, I've got to be there in 45 minutes, traffic takes 30, and I want to stop for a coffee. Outside of practical application, why do you ever look past the present moment?
So I can keep the image of myself in place in that moment.
No, see, it wasn't intended to be answered, but all of your answers are wrong, because there's no you looking past the present moment. It is a part of this consciousness that produces the idea, the image that something needs to be dealt with. And then when that consciousness looks at the image of what needs to be dealt with, it must bring itself to a place to validate the fear it feels. And that's what you are looking beyond the moment to do, seemingly, is to get rid of the fearful issue, when what you're really doing is confirming the consciousness and its continuity as the source of unseen fear and anxiety. Please tell me, this is pretty important if you can see it with me. So now, that's kind of the end of the psychological aspect of it. I have 3 stories to share with you. Each story will build on the lessons inherent. Okay? Ready? Take a nice deep breath. Where do you think the first story has us opening? In the doctor's office. If you don't know, I use certain vehicles in my stories. It's always a different lesson, but we use the same characters, because the characters, every character in any story, any parable, any time, truth tale told, they all represent aspects of our own consciousness that we are unaware of. So that you've heard the expression, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. You know that. Well, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, where's the teacher? Well, somewhere hidden in the student. Because where else does the lesson appear other than in the student, who must be set up and prepared for the appearance of the lesson that, when it dawns, will release the student from the problem. All characters, all creatures, all possibilities, all of it exists simultaneously in our being. All of it. No exceptions. Whatever you see, whatever you experience, all of it is a part of this consciousness. Our task is to understand this consciousness instead of being its captive every time some lower part of it decides it has to get involved in trying to figure out how to save itself from the suffering it just designed for itself. So here's the first story. We're in a doctor's office. The doctor represents the teacher. Doctor represents wisdom. And our would-be aspirant, who is working as hard as she knows how to transform herself, what's her name? Christine. Christine goes to see the doctor quite often, which isn't a bad thing. It would be good if all you went to see the doctor, not the doctor you pay all that ridiculous money to for your fear. She goes to see the doctor when she understands that she doesn't understand something and wants to understand it. So she goes and sees the good doctor, and he says, well, what's going on? Well, I think to myself, yes or no, if you're Christine, I think to myself, I just took 2 steps forward, and then suddenly I'm singing the Paul Simon song, Slip Sliding Away. I didn't go forward at all. It seems like I'm going backwards. And the doctor never shows his exasperation, but he says, how many times do we have to cover this, Christine? It is required that you see certain things you can't see about yourself. And when you see certain things you haven't seen, the parts of you that have been hiding it are simply going to say, see, you're not getting anywhere. That's how it keeps you a captive. So tell me, what are you talking about? She says, and we could go back to the list to tell you the truth. She says, I go to bed worrying. He said, well, lots of people do. I know, she said, but I wake up anxious. Well, that's not too bad. Then I don't even know I've finished my breakfast when I'm done eating it because I'm so thinking about so many things that have to get done. She said, well, this is getting worse. She says, I can't stop thinking. I can't stop thinking. I never knew it, she said. And most of my thought is either what to do about something that happened a day or 20 years ago, and I can't separate the thoughts from the past or the future I'm imagining from the way that I feel, so that I'm wrapped up in these thoughts and it's just a constant torment. I go over conversations in my head. Please, what's going on? Can you help me? And thank God for the good doctor who lives inside of you. He says, of course I can. She said, do you need to take tests? He said, no, I've got this one nailed. What's going on? He said, I've categorized this syndrome in quite a few different ways. He said, but the first one, I will just tell you, it's called BITS. Yes, BITS. Thank you, Dana. Give her $3 donation back. Well, you know when somebody says something, you know the first. Speaking of the appearance of anxiety, worry, and doubt, the phone rings and it's the doctor. I need you to come in the office. Right, Barbara? BITS. What is BITS? He said it stands for Before Its Time Syndrome. Before its time syndrome. I said, I'm not quite sure, what are you talking about? He said, well, it has other names. For instance, another name for BITS is FUNI. Yeah, FUNI. What do you mean FUNI? Well, it's an acronym, as you know. FOONI. Well, what is FUNI syndrome? It stands for fear of one's own negative imagination. FUNI syndrome, which, by the way, sounds like phony a little bit if you'll pay attention. She says, is that it? And he said, no, there's one other syndrome. They're all connected. It's called sonatini. 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 Well, what is sonatini? It's an acronym, SONOTNI, And it stands for, write it down please, suffering over nothing other than negative imagination. So not an I. For those of you who understand this work a little more deeply, that is a very powerful I in us, isn't it? That is constantly imagining something that's going to happen or that might. And every time it starts to imagine it, the sense of identification is overwhelming. And in the overwhelming identification, the wish to escape the condition. And the more you try to escape what has been imagined, the more you can only enter into imagination to do so. Please? She goes, well, Funi, I get it. I get it. Everything, I'm always taking everything before it's time. If that's what you're saying, that's exactly what I'm saying. Well, what am I going to do? It just seems to be there. Because if you're telling me what I think, you're saying that the time that I fear hasn't come, but that my imagination tells me it has. The thing that I worry over hasn't come, but I make it there by imagining its meaning and then trying to deal with it. So it is before its time. But what am I to do about it? He says, let me tell you a story. Now I'm going to have the doctor tell Christina's story. Take a nice deep breath. I really love this story. A young father and mother have 2 children, twins. We'll put them around 13 years old. And it turns out that certain circumstances have transpired where the dad and mom, and we could go both ways with this. One, he may have gotten a better job offer, so things you would think were positive, but they have to move to another part of the country for him to take the job. Or his being downsized at work and they have to move to another part of the country so they can afford to live in something they can't afford to live in. It makes no difference which story, which line that's on. And when the children hear of the impending situation, you know pretty well what goes on inside of them, don't you? They're both overcome, afraid, anxious, worried, so much so that it takes over their life in such a way that it's evident to the father and mother that the children are struggling with a real problem that they do not understand. The dad and mom will say that they are students. They're working to work with it. They understand it. Now, the kids, these 2 kids, are avid athletes. And where they've grown up in the country, they have a farm. They love to grow things. They love to go to the ocean. They love surfing. So they have all these hobbies. But it looks like where they're going, that's not going to be there for them. So that's part of the fear and apprehension that they have. They won't know who they are, where they're going. So the dad wants to teach them a lesson, a very specific lesson. One that can't be taught in any other way, because you can sit and talk till the cows come home, but unless you can help the mind that isn't developed to see what it is possible for it to see through real time, you're just sunk. So he says to them, you know what? Grab your boards, get in the car. We're going surfing. I don't want to go. Grab your boards. We're going to the beach. We're going surfing. So they grab their boards. They throw them in the car, little 5-footers. Back in the day when I was surfing, surfboards were 50 feet long, weighed 8,000 pounds, and you needed 6 people to get them in the water. And I still couldn't stand up on them. Anyway. Greg Noel was the name of the old board that I had. So they get to the beach, and Dad and the 2 kids paddle out to the wave. And when you surf, if you know anything about surfing, you paddle out before the shore break, and you wait there where you can see the swells coming in. And you wait for a certain swell, and at a certain place you start paddling, you take off, you catch the wave, and you're gone. So they're out there for 10, 15 minutes, nothing has happened. And Dad turns to the boy, and he says, son, paddle out, quick, catch that wave. Boy looks around. What are you talking about? Get it, catch that wave. Dad, what, have you lost your mind? There's no wave coming. Really? No. He said, All right, this is kind of a bummer. He said, let's grab our boards and let's go visit Grandma's apple orchard, and maybe we can have some good fun there, because this isn't working. And he just drops the whole subject. They grab their boards, they get in the car, and they drive to Grandma's apple orchard. They get to the apple orchard, and they're standing there in the orchard, and the father says to the little girl, sweetheart, pick that apple, okay? Get it for me. She looks at the apple tree. She looks at her dad. What are you talking about? I can't pick that apple. Why can't you pick it for me? Don't you love me? What are you talking about, Dad? The flower hasn't even become a bud yet, let alone an apple. It's way before its time. You can't possibly pick it. You're starting to get the drift of these stories? I see. He says, let's sit down. And they sit down on a bench under one of the trees. And he says, kids, I want to ask you a question. What did we do today? We went surfing. Well, did you catch that wave I asked you to catch? You've lost your mind, Dad. There was no wave, so I couldn't catch it. Well, what about you, sweetheart? Were you able to pick that apple that I asked you to pick for me? No, because I made it clear to you there's no apple there. So he says, so to be clear, just as you can't catch a wave or pick an apple before its time, so is it impossible to end a fear or an anxiety that only exists in a time you've imagined to come. Their eyes kind of brighten because they don't get the lesson completely. Maybe, how many of you can sense the lesson in this? He says, that's right, because he could see them catching on. Like exactly what you fear may happen to you in a time that hasn't come. Exactly like what you fear may happen to you in an imagined time to come. Isn't that what the kids are upset and anxious and worried over? A time to come. Can you catch a wave before it's time? Can you pick an apple before it's time? Why not? It's not there. And neither are the moments that you can't stop worrying over. Neither is the event that you can't stop thinking about, past or future. It doesn't exist save for a consciousness that creates from itself the content it requires to resist that moment that it has made, so it can feel like now I can start struggling to save myself from this situation that's out there, and the situation's not out there, is it? Is it? First summary. Where is the actual location of this time to come that brings this seemingly imminent threat with it? Where's the actual location of this time to come? We've been working on it. Where is it? It's in imagination. Now, if the actual location of the time to come, yes or no, have you found yourself unable to stop thinking about a time to come? Yes, Joni? Yes. Patricia? I like that movie with Martin Short. I'm possessed. He had that little man inside of him. He's talking to him. I'm possessed. I can't stop. And you can't stop because it was never you that started. Who struggles with an imagined time to come? I'm asking, who struggles with an imagined time to come? An imagined self. A sense of self that is entirely fabricated from a collection of associated thoughts and feelings and the combined experience of things in the past that tell you this is what happened then, but it doesn't say that. Therefore, this is what needs to be done so this won't repeat itself because I don't want to go through that again. Can you imagine? I don't want to go through that again, so let me go through it now. Does that sound sane to any of you? So, if the captive that we're talking about of the time to come is a captive of imagination, then it should be evident that we, in that moment, are asleep, in a dream, quite literally. Now, who is made a captive of a dream? Who's made a captive of a dream? The dreamer. And as long as the dreamer remains resisting, fighting, thinking about, trying to get past the moment, he or she, that consciousness, has not only created the character in the story, but the character is now complicit with the continuation of the story it's trying to escape, isn't it? And no one's there that knows any different than that. What will happen if I don't wake up? Is there any hope, going over that entire list that we just went over, is there any hope that when the next OMG moment appears, I'm going to be able to do anything other than look at what my mind tells me the moment means, which is all imagined, then deal with the imagined moment by imagining a me that has to get past that pain and find myself in that labyrinth of thoughts and feelings of which there is no escape, because every attempt to escape builds another layer of the labyrinth. Yes? The mind cannot see, the divided mind cannot see that the only thing that stalks it is some fearful creature that lives only in an imagined time to come. Don't you feel stalked by something that's coming that you're not ready to deal with? You don't know what's going to happen. Don't you feel stalked? It's quite palpable, isn't it? See, that's the point that I really want to make, because it's like another whole talk. That once that consciousness begins to get caught in that vice of imagining something terrible and then trying to figure out how to deal with it, then the body becomes a complicit partner in the hormones and all the rest of the stress structure that comes with the mind believing that it's in some problem that it can't get out of. So now the body starts to carry that. That's what I alluded to when I opened the talk. That I'm literally constantly tense. And it takes almost nothing to trigger the tension, because it's so rampant and so ready to come up, because I've never escaped that consciousness that creates the unending imagined unwanted moment. Everybody still with me? Last story and the exercise, if you will. Still with me? Now, if we awaken sufficiently to see this, and how many of you are beginning to catch on, so to speak? Little by little, yeah? You may still get caught, but you're able from time to time to bring yourself back and start waking up a little bit. And the waking up is what? Essentially, it's entering into another relationship with the consciousness that was divining all the relationships for you up until that moment. Because all you could see was what it was telling you. Now you can see it telling you something. Now you can see it pumping you with all of these painful thoughts and feelings, aware of it. Last story. Ready? I really like this story too. Let's say that once upon a time there was a nobleman, and the nobleman and his wife had a beautiful home. And the nobleman, over time, had become an aspirant. He had developed himself, in part because he was able to see that all of the things that he thought were going to make him noble didn't make him noble at all. Do you understand that? Identified with position, power, authority, possession doesn't make you noble. Makes you a wreck when anything threatens what you believe is the source of your nobility. There's nothing in this world, nothing in this world can turn you into a noble human being. You must discover, which is part of what we're talking about tonight, that there lives within you a divine nobility, something that cannot be reduced, rendered into a quivering mess when suddenly some event comes along, that cannot be remanded over to the world of dreams. Its power, to use that word, is that it can't be dragged into a dream. Do I need powers to escape the problems in a dream if I don't go to sleep? Do I? So he has a steward, and he has a deputy steward, and he has help that live in the house with him, who want to be in the house because they admire the nobleman for what it is that he has become and done and learns, and they actually learn from him as they serve him. So one day it turns out that there is a knock at the door, and the deputy steward goes over and he opens the door, and standing there are the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come. Do you know the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come? Fear, anxiety, worry, and doubt. I trust you know the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Most of us do, I hope. This is the 4 horsemen on this planet. The 4 horsemen of horrible things to come. And they're all standing outside the front door. And he looks there gobsmacked, his jaw opens, and they say to him, "Can I come in?" And he doesn't know what to do. In come the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come. The house gets trashed, meaning, and after they do their damage, they go away, which is something you really need to understand, especially in the story. Haven't you noticed yet how after you get worked over and you've got nothing left to give, all of it goes away? Then you're just left there like some old fig, a prune dried out, life sucked out of you. No joy, nothing, no feeling of anything right. Why? Because you entertained the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come, but you didn't know what the steward and the deputy steward is about to learn. So the nobleman knows this is unavoidable. They have to learn their lessons. And they come to him and he say, "What happened? I'm so sorry for what took place in the house." He said, "It didn't affect me. You're the guys that have to you're the guys that have to clean up, you know. You just, what can we do?" He said, "If you really want to know, here's what to do the next time the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come appear at the door, because they're coming back." He said, "What?" He said, "I want you to open the door slowly. I want you to deliberately look closely at each of them, and then I want you to say to them, 'Well, seems you're a little early. It's not time yet.' And then just quietly close the door. That's all you have to do." He said, "Well, what's going to happen next?" He said, "Oh, you'll hear them screaming, but you didn't invite them in. And because you didn't welcome them in one way or another, they have no authority and can do nothing to enter this house. Because this house is governed by laws that are greater than the 4 horsemen of terrible things to come. Because this house lives in the present kingdom." They said, "That's it?" "Yep." Next day, knock at the door. Steward kind of afraid because he doesn't really know. Does he really know what he's talking about? Because the last time this happened, I had horse hoofs over my chest laying down in the foyer. He opens the door slowly, and there they are. Who's there? And who are the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come? Fear, anxiety, worry, and doubt. Now you have an intimate relationship, don't you, with the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come. This is the horror of being a sleeping human being, is that you can't tell who's at your door and who's not. Because one of the things that the 4 horsemen of horrible things to come carry with them are signs that say, something terrible is going to happen, I'm here to help. And you always buy it. Come on in. Let's talk. Let's get all this worked out because something terrible's coming. And you're looking at the only thing that's terrible, which is your unawareness that the four horsemen of horrible things to come are part of this unconscious nature that can't wait to create the horrible things to come in imagination. Stewart opens the door, looks outside, slowly peers out. There they are. Their hooves, they're pawing at the floor. Too bad you can't see it. I'm pawing at the floor. He tried to gather himself. Seems you're a little early. It's not time. He looks, and they all shriek at the same time. Scares him into slamming the door. Slams the door shut, and the door pounds. Believe me when I tell you, you will feel the door pound. But within a few seconds, even if it took a few years, the pounding stops. Stewart thinks, wow. He opens the door. There's no one there. He runs to the nobleman. He says, it was unbelievable. They're gone. You were right. All I had to do was tell them it's not your time. It's not time. And they just left. And the nobleman says, well, there's more lessons. He says, because the fact of the matter is, they may be gone, but they'll be back. Why? Well, let's just say you have some unfinished business with them. You've been told a great secret. When the fear, anxiety, worry, and doubt starts to tear at you and make it feel as if you don't think about how to deal with what may or may not happen, something horrible is going to happen to you. And something horrible happens to you when you start trying to think about how to deal with what you've imagined may happen to you. Now, I know how real that feels. You know my saying? The feel is real, but the why is a lie. I know how real it feels when your mind starts, listen to me, the past persecuting the present. Like we talked about on Sunday, because where does that mind get what it puts up on the screen of your consciousness that sucks you into the effort to deal with it? Where does it get all of those painful thoughts and feelings, the experiences that you don't want to repeat at all costs? From where does it get all that? From the past. So there it is, and it's doing that, and because you are not aware of the fact that that level of consciousness operates under certain laws. And the laws that that consciousness operates under is that what persists only continues because of resistance to it. So the more you try to deal with some negatively imagined event, the more of that event you will have to deal with. You are literally turning into a pillar of salt as you look at the pain you fear may come and then live in the pain of trying to escape it. Unaware that there's no escaping, listen to me, unaware there is no escaping the pain of what is imagined because something in you keeps imagining it to give you that pain. And that's the loop, that's the labyrinth. Following me? We're going to end the talk with the summary and the exercise, although the exercise should be clear, isn't it? What's the exercise when fear, worry, anxiety, and doubt knocks on your door? What's the exercise? Open the door. You got to look. You can't, this is what you do. No. You have to open the door. That means you have to become conscious of what's standing on the threshold. You open the door and you want to look directly at each of these states, at this one state, as that case may be. And then, when you are fully aware of where you are and where they are at the same time, then you say what? You're early. It's not your time. Before it's time. Before it's time. Here's the last key lesson. This is the summary and the exercise. Every dark shadow must pass. All such creatures are under law. This law also holds true when it comes to the appearance of any fear or anxiety we feel moving into and through us, but only if we dare wait there unmoved long enough to see it slip back into its native nothingness. Do you understand the law that every shadow must pass? It is exact same thing with every interior creature that appears in this consciousness. It appears because conditions allow it and produce the moment of its appearance. That law that all things must pass holds true to the appearance of any creature of fear, anxiety, of any of the four horsemen of horrible things to come. That holds true to them. They must leave your door if and only if you will wait there unmoved long enough to see them do what they must do under law, which is slip back into the native nothingness, into the imagination world from which out of which they came. Do you think you have something to work with now? Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.
Welcome back, everyone. Now it's time for our Q&A with Guy. But before we get into that, I just want to bring your attention to an important offer that we have this month. And Eric, if you could bring that up, that would be helpful. And it's about the 3 conversations that Guy had in his some of his interviews. And if you haven't listened to Guy's interviews before, there's literally hundreds, thousands of them since I've been going, and they all have a different slant on it. And Guy speaks with someone else about these ideas and the work, and they're great. And so what we did was call 3 of the best of these, and to be able to offer to you something for a small donation of only $10. And you can get this and get all the information if you go to guyfinley.org/package. And all of these donations help support this work. And we run this this is a nonprofit organization, and all these donations are tax deductible in the United States. So do go there and take advantage of this. Is a great way to get something back right away and have something to listen to. guyfinley.org/package. Okay, I think we're ready to get going with our Q&A with Guy. Guy, are you ready to go?
I am.
All right. We have Namita in the queue, and everyone else, if you'd like to speak with Guy, just raise your hand if you're on GoToWebinar, and you can it'll bring you into the queue. If you're on one of the other platforms, you can go to your chat box and send a written question, and Kate will help you back there. So we're going to start with Namita right now.
Hello.
Hi, Namita.
So these 4 horsemen, I've noticed they're usually like the closest relationships, like your husband, or they'll say something which triggers these 4 horsemen. And I have and thanks to your talks, I think I'm able to like be more aware, and I do not get into the drama anymore, and I try to like pay attention to like anything else in the room if I'm not able to, just to like pay attention to anything else, like a spoon or whatever, or like a painting or something like that, just to not get into the drama, like not get sucked in. So my question is, in that moment, because my attention it pulls your attention. So I'm trying to see what other things I can do, like focusing on the breath, but I've realized that I can't focus on my breath for too long. And so I want to ask, like, what is the connection between thought, breath, and images? And you mentioned something like impressions in your talks, and also sound. Like, how do you like consciously respond? So what's the mechanism of that?
So take a nice deep breath, Namita. Everybody, nice deep breath. Namita, it is in some ways a long, strange journey. But in the end, as it has been popularly said, I find that I return where I began. What that means, Namita, is that at some point I have to see the absolute futility of trying to avoid my own consciousness. Why do I want to avoid my consciousness? Why do I want to avoid the experience of my husband, my brother, my mother, the news, looking in the mirror? Why do I want to avoid that experience? Who is it that wants to avoid that experience. And who it is that wants to avoid the experience is made by the avoidance of that experience. We are changed, Namita, because we finally see through all of the futility of trying to change an unwanted experience into something that we believe benefits us. Every experience of life is for our benefit. Every last one, warts and all, is for our benefit. It is impossible to escape your own reactions by trying to relate to something else in the moment you don't want that reaction. It is impossible. It seems possible for a long time, and you may have to go through this. Everybody does. It's the same journey in terms of understanding the operation of this unconscious nature. But at some point, you will be someplace and you're going to see yourself, think to yourself, you start doing the Lord's Prayer, oh, Jesus Christ, I'm the Lord, Son, have mercy on me. You start thinking, I need to watch my breath. I need to pay attention to the spoon. I need to fix my eyes on something beautiful outside. I need to think to myself and analyze this condition as being problematic, and I mustn't try to avoid it. So all of those things are the way the consciousness avoids the experience of itself. We needn't avoid an experience that we are aware of as being not ours. It's no longer necessary to avoid an unwanted moment when you understand the reason it's unwanted is because it belongs to something you always thought was you, and now you know it's not. You just know it's not. You're not thinking about it. You are, for all intents and purposes, wheat separated from the chaff. You are now not just what is acting, not just what is being acted on, but you are the observer of the whole of that moment. And as the observer, Namita, of the whole of that moment, you're willing to let that whole moment appear, fruit, fall off, and disappear. And you're left knowing that you spent all of those years trying to save yourself from something that you could have never saved yourself from, and only the light that reveals that to you liberates you from it. Everybody in the room understand that? Namita, I hope some of that got through. This is not, as Mr. Howard often said, this is not mental. Some of us have sharp intellects. Some of us have highly tuned emotions. Others have bodies that are sensitive. This is what happens when the mind, the body, and the heart are brought together in a unified field of awareness that allows what only that awareness can see, and that is that these things in me have always moved separately, and I've always been moved by them. Now I know they don't move separately, and my task is to see all of that and allow it, and allow the four horsemen of horrible things to come, to be at the door, and to see them and understand the only reason they're there is because they still have business with me. And now, as I say, but before it's time, as I say, you're here early. Before you get what I'm saying, before I do all that, then I can just say that, and I don't have to deal with them. I don't have to deal with fear. I'm telling you, the day will come where you won't have to deal with fear. It'll knock at the door. You'll know what's outside. You'll know how it wants to get you involved, telling you, what about this and what about that? All of that will be there, and you'll just look out before it's time. Let me be here where I exist. Not where you exist, not where it exists, not where they exist, but where I am given my existence by something that gives it to me free of charge and free of conflict, as long as I agree to see the truth of myself. On we go, Doug.
All right, Guy. There's no one in the queue. We do have a written question, which I'm going to read, but I want to encourage anyone, if they'd like to speak with Guy, now's the time to raise your hand. anything works, and it will be helpful to all of us. So go ahead and raise your hand in the queue. But in the meantime, or write a question if you wish. Here's a question from Neil. He says, Guy, can you speak to your words from the road to good fortune? My situation is myself.
What I have called in the past the road to good fortune, the road to good fortune is paved with the realization that my situation is myself. I fear something that I don't think is myself. Right? You don't have a fear that isn't part of yourself. From whence comes the fear? Other than the past trying to protect itself, pursue that which will free it or liberate it, so that it looks to its wants to escape what it doesn't want? Love, God's love, is realizing that everything you see is a part of you. And when you see that everything is a part of you, you will see that everything that is a part of you is a part of thee. What do you run from? Something that's not you. Who do you hate? Something that's not you. What are you afraid of? Something that's not you. Where are you hoping to get to? Someplace where you're not. What do you worry about? Something that shouldn't be there. You should do the exercise of thinking this through for yourself so that you actually understand. And may God make it so that I see it so clearly, there's no way to squirm out of it. If I'm with somebody and I'm angry because there is something in me that demands that person be something other than he or she is, because when I'm with them, if I can change them, then I won't have to experience myself. Wherever I go, I experience myself. Wherever is taking place is the experience of myself. And one day you'll understand there's no good experience and there's no bad experience. There's just this beautiful experience of understanding you're living in a world that is forever unfolding within you, revealing all that awaits within you, so you can see the truth of yourself and no longer be for or against, no longer hate or love what you think is good for you. You will just be a kind, compassionate, patient human being, busy living out a life that now you know you were given. That you know you were given. You can say all day long, oh, I know I was given this. If you knew you were given it, then why do you select this part? That's the good part. Give me more of that. That's not the part I want. Get rid of that. You're given what you're given freely so you can be set free through the realization that you are given every moment of your life as part of the revelation of your relationship with God. Anything else, Doug?
We have a question from Cece that I can read to you.
Okay.
She asked, would you happen to know how to close our psychic door? If you don't know what that is, then I'm not really sure how to explain it. So if you can't answer it, I understand.
Glad we got over that one. This is what I was saying to Namita, Cece. The story is an illustration of an interior understanding that is being actualized in the moment. Our problem is that we're trying to close the door on anything that we believe is a disturbance. Isn't that what all of your thoughts are? Aren't you building a wall, a door to set between you and the pain that's disturbing you? And I want to shut the door. Does the light need to shut the door on the shadow that it gives birth to? Or by the fact of its existence and a greater movement than any shadow will ever understand, is that shadow forever appearing and disappearing by the grace of the light that makes it possible? Does the sun need to shut the door on the shadow? Why? Because the shadow doesn't exist without the sun. And when you know that all of these things don't exist without the light that is revealing to you inwardly what you don't know, then you won't need to shut the door on anything. You'll understand what it means to open the door, meaning I'm going to come awake, to look outside at the four horsemen of horrible things to come, become aware of as deeply as I can this fear, this worry, this anxiety, and watch all the things that it's saying to me, and watch how something in me wants to get involved and start to figure out how to protect myself from it. And then if I'm there enough, I realize, wait a minute, they don't exist without me not wanting them at the door. Their reality is a component of my insistence that I get past this moment that is imagined. You don't need to shut the door. Honest to God, you should be tired of shutting the door. How many of you know you shut the door on anybody you don't like? Slam. What do you think trying to get rid of a moment is? Shut the door. Under my Sean Connery. My jaw doesn't work sometimes. Shut the door. So it sounds like it's contradictory, but I'm really saying first open the door. Then when you've opened it and you see that what you're looking at doesn't exist apart from what you wish wasn't there, then the door is shut by itself, because now you're separated from the illusion of a self, separate from what the experience is. Yes? Okay. Anything left, Doug?
That's all we got right now, Guy.
I will look at this again in some way more deeply on Saturday, and then again on Sunday. Sunday we're going to really look at something that you have always known and felt but never understood yet, but you will have more insight into it before the week is over. I hope to see you. Be safe. Oh, what happens when there's a knock at the door? Who's at the door? Yeah. Good night.